Hey, Giants, welcome back to your next journey, the journey of grief. In this webinar, it's going to be a brief webinar. We're going to talk about the value of grief. I think sometimes people hear that word and they think there's no value in that experience, right? That doesn't feel good. But if you look at it and what it's meant to do, it is powerful. It can really impact you. So we invite you to just, as you go through this journey with us, to really just put down any judgments, let down any perceptions that you might be carrying, any point of views for a moment, and open up to the possibility that there's another way to see this and that it can actually serve you. So as we dive into this, we're going to hopefully serve you as we talk about grief. So I'm going to lead us in. This is number 3 of the journeys out of the 12 journeys. So we're still dealing with kind of the root journeys here, the inner work. So as we do this inner work, that becomes foundational to everything else that you create in your world. So when we talk about the 12 journeys, we have 6 root journeys that are foundational to everything else, because when it comes to your growth, that'll dictate what you grow and what you create into the world. And so grief is number 3 of the 6, and we'll cover the next ones over the next few weeks here. So, on the journey of grief, this is from Rumi and a good friend Debbie Roth. If you haven't looked into her work on forgiveness work, she is powerful. But she shared this quote with me: "Joy lives concealed in grief." The word grief comes from gravare, which means to make heavy. To cause grief comes from gravis, weighty. So it's a heaviness in our life. It's like something happened. There's an event, and that event could be anything. I think people tend to associate grief with the loss of life, but grief can come in a loss of a job. It can come in a loss of a marriage. It can come in a loss of an ideal, like a dream that you had that didn't come true. It can come in a loss of ability. So some people get sick and there's a loss in that. There's grief and heaviness that comes with that.
I've been through
It,
stuff where Nick, where it's like
yeah.
the grief of what could have been.
Yes. Yeah. Can you talk about that? We were teaching teachers in Southern Utah and that came up too.
For me, and you can expound on this too,
Sure.
but there's things or life events that can happen. You could go through a divorce. You could lose a job. For me, it was like I had sunk so much time and energy into a particular business, and
Mm.
thought, man, this is it. This is how it's going to be. I'm going to do this, and conquer the world, kind of thing, And then
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
and then it all unraveled, and unraveled in the way that it needed to happen. Looking back, I'm grateful for the journey, but at the time, tell you what, like I thought that I had it all figured out, and then there was this
Yeah.
grieving of all these things, of the possibilities that could have been, that now were never gonna be.
Right. Yeah. That's powerful because I've been through that. So I had a business that failed and I was foreclosed on, bankrupt, getting food at a food bank. There's grief around that. Just looking at yourself feeling small inside of that. You look at reality, you're like, wow, my reality is really heavy right now. This
Yep.
isn't what I had in mind.
It can
Expounding.
shake your identity too, like,
Yes.
to the core, like, "Oh, what am I?" You can feel very, very small in those moments.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the journeys of unconsciousness and awareness, we start to realize how much we do automatically. And then when you go into the space of awareness, you notice how much you judge automatically. And now coming into grief, now we're moving into another space of this is heavy work. This is heavy work. I've had people tell me, look, I come out of your trainings, these first few trainings, feeling really heavy. And I'm used to the raw. What's going on here? Well, that's coming, but you got to do the heavy work because this is where life really changes for you. It's this grief really has you look at reality as it is, objectively. It pulls it back in from the ideals and pulls it back inside here. I remember teaching the teachers, there were 300 teachers, they're special ed teachers, and they talked about parents who had ideals for their children. And then their children were born with special needs. So when they were born, those ideals that they had, the child that could have been or was going to be, has shifted to the child that is and that has special needs. So that whole ideal shifted, and there was grief around the loss of what should have been or could have been to what is. And there's no there's no shame or anything inside of that. It's just a realization that what I had in mind is different. And a lot of parents go through a grief of what they had as an ideal. And it's an interesting point of view because it's just that's what it is. It's a point of view about what's ideal or what society expects or what we expect within ourselves. So there's two forms of impact that are created inside of grief. One is from abandonment. From Susan Anderson's work, she talks about the swirl method. So your world is shattered. You lose a job, you lose a limb, you lose the ability to walk. Your world's shattered. You're divorced. You go through all these things, and there's a withdrawal. You pull back really hard. There's a pulling back of energy, and then you go internal and you start to spin, and you have this rumination, this reflection about what's going on. And then there's a rage. Like this isn't how it's supposed to be. I shouldn't be here. This isn't fair. This isn't ideal. And then after the rage comes the lifting. And this is where people tend to get stuck is they don't lift. They don't re-engage with life, and re-engaging with life is huge. Then you go into grief in the form of loss of life, end of life, the denial. No, this isn't happening. This can't be happening to me. You get that acknowledgement that, yes, you do have stage 4 cancer, or, some news that's very impactful, and you go into that denial. No, no, this isn't happening. And then there's an anger about what's happening. You get really mad about it. And then you start to bargain and beg. Like, if I do this, will you take it away? If can we just do this? There's this begging. And then you go into depression. And then you move into the space of acceptance. And acceptance is going to be a journey of its own. We'll talk about that in the next journey. But today we're going to talk about depression and the value of depression, because you hear depression, and I think it's 70 to 80% of the population experiences depression. You would think
A
like
lot.
entrepreneurs have it figured out, right? 70% of entrepreneurs experience depression and anxiety in a given year. 70%. And you think therapists have it all figured out. They don't feel depression at all. 80% of graduates, according to the American Psychological Association, have depression at the point of graduation. 80%. And then they're going into the field and learning, how to work with that. A lot of them go into the field because of that depression. I see depression from a different light. I see it a little differently. I see it as a useful tool. Grief as well, anxiety as well. They can serve us if we'll allow it. And so in depression, when we get into that depressed state, there's this resignation. We resign from our world the way it is. So whatever activity we're working on, we pull back that energy. Like Susan Anderson's work, there's that withdrawal, right? That internalization. So in depression, you have this resignation to what is, and you start to reflect and ruminate on what is. So you really start to look at what created this? Why is this happening? And sometimes that brings up even more negative energy. And then you really look at reality like it is, an objective reality. This is the way it is. And that can be really heavy for people. And people can get spun up here because what they tend to do is they numb out right here. It is so intense. The emotions are so heavy that they numb out in some form. And unfortunately, some people take their lives right here
Mhm.
because they just don't see a way out. And where I see depression really serving people is that it gives you a chance to have reverence and respect for what is, to really look at how your behaviors are not serving or creating what you want in your life and giving you an opportunity to re-engage in a new way. So instead of re-engaging in the old way that's not working, you can pull back, reflect on it, look at reality like it is, have a respect and a reverence for that, and then re-engage.
I would interject too, like if you're at that point, this is just a sidebar and
Yes.
probably not
Yeah.
part of the webinar, but if you're at that point where you're having suicidal thoughts, there are professionals, there are, you can call the suicide hotline. There are people that are there. There's a support network because we realize and recognize that can be very heavy, and we don't want you to do that. So if you're
Yeah.
at that point, make sure
That,
that you go get the professional help that you need, because we're not licensed therapists or you know um, equipped to deal with that in this situation.
yeah.
Our goal here is to just help highlight like what happens in the brain and the process, and to help you, hopefully before you get to that point, to start moving out of it.
Dude, I'm so glad you brought that up, because it truly is. If you're in that really deep depression, you're having a hard time breaking out, you lean on people that can do it. Therapists are there for it. Psychiatrists are there for it. They can prescribe meds. They can walk you through it. They have the tools to do that. We're talking about that higher level depression, right? So I'm glad you brought that up. So if you look at the depressed state, right, as a tool, if you start looking at it with a point of view of this is here to serve me. I'm feeling down. This is normal to feel down. If there's an impact in your life, it's normal to have a withdrawal of energy. And so to reflect on that and look at reality like it is and have a respect for reality as it is and re-engage in a new way, the quicker you can move that through, that is called resilience, right? So the quicker we can get through that process, the faster we re-engage with life and the quicker we move in another direction. Lisa Feldman Barrett in her work, I think we'll talk about that here in a minute, of what depression is. She talks about it, how it's not living up to our own ideals. So we start to measure ourselves, we start to judge ourselves, we start to lose energy around it. It's meant to have us lose energy. Our body's perceiving that what we're doing isn't working, so it's going to pull back energy. It's going to make you tired. It's going to make you mentally tired. You're not going to be able to focus. You're not going to be able to engage with things. But the way out, and we'll talk about this in the other journeys, through the journey of acceptance and the journey of gratitude, which are coming up, are the tools that are going to put you back in your power so that you can re-engage. For now, what we're doing is we're recognizing how depression and anxiety impact the body. That's
And
all we're
that's just
doing.
it too, right? Like the
Yeah,
becoming aware. Like when you can start to see, oh, that's what's coming up, then you can change the behavior, or
right.
you have the opportunity to change the behavior. And if you need help, then there's levels of help that are out there. So, yeah, I love this.
Beautiful. Yeah, because your unconsciousness, if you're unconscious, going back to the journey of unconsciousness, there's not much to do there because you don't even know. Like you're just doing what you do. You're reacting to the world. When you get to the awareness, the challenge is to be the observer, not the judge, because we have this tendency to go into the judge mode of shaming ourselves and guilting ourselves. We're trying to create a space of just let it be what it is. You're just aware now. Grief is recognizing where you are in the stage of that process. So grief moves you into that heaviness. Now I'm aware and I feel this heaviness. I feel this fear about the future, this uncertainty.
Hmm.
So Lisa Feldman Barrett, she says that numerous experiments showed that people feel depressed when they fail to live up to their own ideals, but when they fall short of standards set by others, they feel anxious. This is interesting because we create these ideals of what we think we should be. And often those ideals are created by our culture, our history, our society. And so what we think are our own ideals are truly ideals that have been developed by our history. And then also when we look at the ideals of what we think society wants from us, or our family or friends or culture wants from us, and we measure against that, then we feel the anxiety of,
And
I
we're
don't know if
hard
I'm
on
gonna.
ourselves too.
Oh man,
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
like we set that bar pretty high. So sometimes we like almost like uh sabotage that, like we put it so high that it can feel sometimes almost impossible. So then you
It
can spin into this. So I
yeah.
can understand that.
Yeah,
I
and it
felt I felt all those things. So that's how I
just
relate. Yeah.
just in this conversation
Yeah,
alone.
just
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, the stress that kills or cripples most of the population comes from people being too hard on themselves when they
Yeah,
don't
I
live
didn't
up.
even know that was the next slide.
Yeah, see, you spoke it. So when they're too hard on themselves, when they don't live up to their own imaginings, and hear this, their own imaginings about how other people think they should behave. Byron Katie talks about is we're projecting a movie into the minds of others or the world of others. They don't even know it's playing, but we're judging ourselves off of that movie, and we're judging them off the movie they don't even know is playing in their world that we're
We're
projecting
really
out
good
there.
storytellers or movie makers, aren't we?
Yeah. But
Uh,
the thing is that whatever you're telling yourself is your perception of the world. So I don't know if we could see this. Maybe, oh, that makes it worse. I'm going to pull it back here.
Yeah, I can
But
read it. Good.
you're only always justified in your perception of the world. Your judgments are your truths. So think about that. If we go back to the journey of awareness, when you go into that judgment mode, that is your truth. That's how you see yourself. That's how you see the world. That's your point of view. That's your perception of the world. It's your judgment. You're never not going to judge. So if we can put that on the table now, is you will always judge. It's what you do with it that matters.
Hmm.
So if the judge comes up, it's, are you paying attention to the judge and allowing it to rule your life and act and speak into the world, your creations, or are you just aware of it? Because the more we get into that space of, hey, I'm judging again. Great. I did that.
Great. Hmm.
I have that point of view.
Yeah, that's
It's,
huge, actually. That's a big deal right there.
yeah.
Just recognizing that
Well,
could change and shift your life.
the joy is the peace. You know, Cordelia Ghaffar and her work. Um, she's a Muslim woman, powerful. We got to have an interview with her. And she talks about joy is getting back to the peace and the love that's already within you.
Hmm.
With grief, you know, what grief is trying to do is clear out all the junk. It's trying to clear out the depression. It's trying to clear out the anxiety about the future, the unknown, the uncertainty. And there's joy in that because when it clears out, it's like the sun coming out on a cloudy day. There's hope. There's
That's what I
light.
see in this picture too. This is
Yeah.
this is interesting that this comes up. And she also said, and this ties into what you're saying, I think. I'm predicting, um, the thoughts are can be your seeds to your growth or your bars to your prison, is what she said.
Mm,
And this is that same type of thing, is if you can transmute that and be aware, you can shift out of this.
yeah. Man, that is such a powerful statement. I mean, when she said that, that had me pause. I'm like, wow. I mean, think of the impact of that. And it's not a shame thing. It's just a recognition that your thoughts are that powerful, that they can be the seeds to your growth or the bars to your prison. I have a video on YouTube. I think I'll put it in here with this journey that talks about it. It's a poem about how we are the master and command or the prisoner,
Hmm.
you know, and
It's a great
so
poem.
I just see it as grief is an opportunity to reconnect with life in a new way. It's taking the heaviness that once was and letting it go and releasing it. And we'll talk about that more in the next journey, in the journey of acceptance, because that's where you really start to let life be what it is and move forward. Um, as we finalize here, when you really get honest with yourself, when you really look at reality like it is, honesty is owning your truth. That's all it is. So when you're honest, you're owning it, you're speaking it, you're recognizing your judgments of the world, you're recognizing your points of view of the world. Depression is meant to get you to really just look at that stuff. Is it working? Is it not working? Anxiety, when you're making your predictions, are you making your predictions from that point of view? Because that's what we have a tendency to do is we make our predictions based on whatever we're perceiving inside of here. And that goes back to the journeys of unconsciousness and awareness, is where are those stories coming from? What are the stories that we're telling? What are the judgments that we have? When we have an awareness around those and now move into the journey of grief, we start to recognize, oh, wow, this is actually here to serve me. It's actually here to return me to the peace and the love that's already there. It's not meant to hurt me. It's not meant to take away my joy. It's actually meant to uncover my joy,
Hmm.
because joy gets clouded. Love and peace, right, as a definition of joy, gets clouded and is masked as anger, is masked as depression, is masked as anxiety. And so when the clouds move out, you start to shine again. You start to have hope and energy again. You're empowered again. And there's a new way of being. So you re-engage with life in a new way. And that's where the power of grief is simply that. It's recognizing I'm in the storm right now. There's a storm. And what we know about storms is, especially in Utah, I'll use it as an analogy, is in Utah, we get the smog and it fills in the whole valley and it's heavy. It's nasty, nasty, thick. I remember one time I couldn't even see across the street from my house. It was so thick.
Hmm.
And then you look at the weather and the weather says, hey, there's a storm coming in. And you're like, oh, I love it because I know what that means. And the storm, you see it coming over the mountain and it's gray and it's dark and it just looks ominous. And it comes over the mountain and it just blows through and the snow drops and the rain drops and it just clears the sky. And after the storm, you go look at the city and it's like crystals and diamonds everywhere. It's just absolutely crisp. There's no more crisp air. It's not more crisp than after a storm.
That's a beautiful analogy because that is a real thing. I just said that the other day to
Yeah.
my wife. I was like, "Holy cow, look how beautiful it is today." That storm really blew out the crap that was here in the valley.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, there's another video that I made called "The Storms of Life." I'll post in here too with this journey because it talks about that analogy of when you start to love the storms, when you start to love the grief, when you start to love depression and anxiety and make them your friend and get to peace with those, you start to realize the power that they have in changing your world. It's no more running from grief, no more running and numbing out from depression, no more running and numbing out from anxiety. I
Mhm.
numbed out for 10 years, a decade. And I tried meds and therapy and all these things and it really took the work of diving into this, what I'm sharing here. Barry McDonough's work, his book Dare. If you haven't read that, you'll want to go grab that book and read it. But the idea of diffusing the energy and allowing it to be there and running toward it, not away from it, and re-engaging with your life is powerful
I have
because
some serious gratitude too. Sorry to interrupt you,
yeah, no,
but
you're
I have
good. Yeah.
some serious gratitude for those storms, and I've been through some of those recently. What it'll do
Yeah.
if you'll recognize it or become aware, conscious of it, is it will blow out the crap. It will make you aware of how you are being.
Yeah.
It doesn't change some of the cause and effect and some of the natural consequences from certain behaviors or decisions, but it makes you aware and gives you a whole new opportunity. It can clear the skies. It can help you see a different perspective and start creating something brand new
Yeah.
from that moment on.
It's a reset, smash the reset button kind
It's
of a
like
thing.
we don't want to call it the easy button because sometimes it's not easy,
No,
but
no.
the reset button is a better term for it because
Yeah.
you can hit that and then start creating however you want to create from that point. See something new and also find the gratitude in it, just like I'm finding.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that as a journey and the power of gratitude too. Um, for a practice this week, as you're getting the emails and you're getting these messages and you're listening to the meditation that goes with this journey, is to allow, and we'll go into that in the next journey, to just allow it to be what it is and recognize, start looking for the positive in non-peace. Look for the positive in what is. Look for the power of grief to reset and re-engage you in a new way. And when I say grief, I say that loosely as depression, anger, anxiety. I mean, it is a natural response to get angry. Just don't stay there, right?
This is going to feel a little different because
Yeah.
not very many people are telling you the positivity of going
They're
through
not.
this. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
but it's part of it. Like we've had people say like this is like I come out of some of these and I feel heavy. I feel this. Good,
Yeah.
good, because you're starting to do the deep work
Yeah.
that it's okay to feel these things.
And
But
and
now what?
yeah, now what? But also going back to what you shared earlier, Ryan, is if it gets too heavy, if you're having suicidal thoughts, reach out to the hotline.
Please.
If you're really struggling getting through the depression, reach out to your therapist. There are meds that will help level this out, right? So that you can do the work. And then keep doing the work because what you're creating is new pathways for that to be created in your life as your reality. Trust me, it'll grow. And as it grows, the other one will lose its weightiness. And in losing that weightiness, this goes back to the gravity of feelings and emotions. in losing that weightiness, the other one's going to gain mass. This new way of being is going to gain mass and be your new normal. And so work toward it each day. It takes about 66 days to create a new habit. So practice, practice, practice daily. Commit to it. If you fall off the bandwagon, just get back on. That's it. Yep. Just pick up where you are and get back on. You don't have to make anything up. Just get back on and keep going.
No shame, no judgment. Just
yep.
You choose, just pop back on it.
That's it. That's it. Okay. Any other thoughts, Ryan?
No, just to finalize that, like I do a keto diet, and every now and again I'm like, fall off the wagon a little bit, you know. But the cool thing is because I've built up that habit, it's very easy to hop back on.
Yeah.
We celebrated a birthday. I wanted some birthday cake and celebrate with my family. I had a piece of cake. I know some of the consequences from that,
Right.
but I can pop right back in. So no judgment, no shame. Hop right back in and keep engaging.
That's perfect. Guys, keep going. We will see you next week in the next journey. Make it a giant day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Love you too.